Rocky Mountain Medics. My name is Skylar Bainbridge, and today we're going to be talking about how we use our radios and why they work out on the line. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the classroom. Welcome to the classroom. Today I'm going to be explaining through drawing why we use radios and kind of how to use radios before we go over the outside of the radio. So when we are assigned to a fire, the fire is pretty big, and the command team needs to talk to its operational leaders, needs to talk to its division leaders. So the fire will be broken up in what's called divisions. For example, I've drawn Division Alpha, Delta, Charlie, and Echo, with that outer circle being kind of the operational fire area. The command center will be set up separately far away from the actual fire area, and so there's going to be a great distance in which we need to talk to one another. So we're going to use our radios. However, radios only have a certain amount of power to them and can only get out so far, especially a handheld radio. So I'm going to assign us here into Division Alpha, and we need to talk to two people. We need to talk to people within our area, and we need to talk back to command, where our medical unit leader is and where the IC is in case we have a medical emergency. Like I said before, radios only have a certain area in which they can naturally reach out and others can hear us. So as soon as I cue into the mic, let's say on channel 1, if people in Division Alpha are listening on channel 1, they will probably hear me. However, people back at command will not. I'm going to draw a little circle as an example here to show you where our area of effect kind of is. So we have one problem taken care of, which is that we can definitely talk with people within our area, or at least pretty line of sight. However, things get in the way. We have landscape, terrain, and we also have the just distance in general. So this is where fire communications establishes repeater towers. Now, a repeater tower, if we access it with our radio, will allow that signal that we produce to be strengthened and then carried out across the other repeated towers. So, if I'm talking in Division Alpha and I send a transmission over to the Division Alpha tower, that is going to be strengthened and repeated across the other repeaters of the operational area, and as long as command is listening to those repeated channels, they will end up hearing me. But so will the rest of the fire as well. So we have two types of channels. We have a simplex channel and a duplex channel. A simplex channel, or a tactical channel, is the lingo that we use out on the fire. A TAC channel is the one that we use line of sight and are generally assigned by division to division, each one having their own tactical channel. This is a non-repeated channel. So as I cue in, that means I'm only using the radio's area of effect to be able to reach out. Anyone within that area, as long as they're listening to the channel I'm communicating on, they will hear it as well. Now I need to talk to command. So this is where we use duplex or repeated channels because of the distance that we have between the command center and the operational fire area. So I need to request a resource, I need to request a medevac, I need to call out a medical 206 plan. I'm going to be using a duplex channel or a command channel. So by calling out on the command channel, it is then accessing the repeater, and that repeater will then strengthen my signal and allow command to be able to hear it. But this will also cover the command repeater over the fire in general, which is why we leave the repeated channels for only critical needs and important transmissions. So command channels are, like we said, important transmissions. They're going to be using, calling out bucket drops on those. They're going to be, operational leaders are going to be talking directly with command. It's going to be pretty busy, especially at the beginning and the middle of the fire, and we are not going to access those unless we have a medical emergency. And this is where the 206 ICS plan comes in. So we have arrived on scene to our patient. We are going to fill out the 206, and then we're going to call it out over the command channel, requesting that command be left silent unless it's medical traffic, especially if it's critical medical traffic. we need to be listening to command in case someone else calls out a 206 for a patient, and we need to be listening to the tactical channels within our area. What we'll do is we need to develop what's called a scan list. So there are 16 channels in one programmed zone of a radio, and we're about to go over zones here in just a second. But within these 16 channels, we have our tactical channels, and we have our repeated command channels. Now we need to listen to both. And by default, if you don't have scan on a radio, you are only going to hear what the radio is sitting on, that channel. So if I have it sitting on channel 1, I am only going to hear channel 1 even if there's other frequencies being talked on around me. So this is where scan comes in. I need to be listening to my local tacticals, the simplex channels, and I also need to be listening to the repeated channels. I'm going to use my ICS 205 and talk with others in my area to see which repeated channel is the best, and I'm going to what's called assign a scan list. When you add channels to a scan list, it'll allow you to hear multiple channels. You're listening to multiple channels at the same time. However, you can only hear one at a time, whichever one is the most recent. So I'm listening to channel 1 and I'm listening to channel 2. Now, if channel 2 starts talking, my radio will then automatically switch over, if scan is on, to listen to channel 2. Once channel 1 starts talking, even if it's in the middle of channel 2's traffic, it will automatically switch to channel 1 because it's the most recent traffic. So you can imagine, the more channels we add to our scan list, the muddier it's going to be for us to listen for the important channels like our command channel, especially on a fire, because we need to be listening to that because of our medical emergencies that we need to respond to. This is where priority comes in. So we built a scan list that's appropriate for our area of operational area of the fire. It allows us to listen to our local resources, and it allows us to listen to command. Now, we need to prioritize the command channel. So you can choose one channel out of a list of 16 that are programmed within a zone that can never be overridden and will always override other radio traffic. So if I'm listening to channel 1, channel 2, and channel 4, and I made channel 1 my priority, I will always hear channel 1 if there's traffic to be received. Even if channel 2 starts talking, it will not override channel 1. This is why it's a priority. So now that we've talked about a scan list and priorities, let's talk about zones. A zone is a programmed list of 16 channels. Think of it as like a folder in your computer that holds 16 individual documents. That folder will be named the fire, let's say the watermelon fire. You go and you click on the watermelon fire, and it'll open up 16 documents. These 16 documents are just going to be the list of 16 program channels that allow you access to talk on that fire. If you switch to another zone, if it's not programmed to be within the operational period of that fire, it will not access the repeaters, and no one's going to be able to hear you as they are not listening to that same zone. Generally, with smaller to medium-sized fires, there is one zone that we need to listen to. However, on very large fires, we can divide up into what is called multiple zones of a fire, which means each part of that fire has a different list of 16 channels that include your tacticals and your commands. So let's say it's divided up into an east side and a west side. If I'm operating on the west side, I'll need to make sure that I have the west clone. However, if I move to the east side, I will need to remember that I need to manually change the zone, which is the list of 16 channels, over to the east side's operational zone. This will allow me access to their repeaters and also their tactical traffic. It's important to know how to change zones on both radios because it's likely that you're going to be on a fire that will need you to swap zones. Let's go ahead and take a look at the outside of the most common radio that we use out on the fire, which is the KNG P150. With any good piece of equipment, let's just start by just looking at it. Just look at it. Well, now that we're done looking at it, let's dive right in. So, Let's start with the buttons on top here, as they're going to be the most important, and then we'll make our way down. As you can see, on top, we have 2 knobs and 2 toggles, including our antenna. This one is going to be our list of 16 channels within the zone that we are currently on, and that's how we're going to swap between each channel, just by toggling this knob left and right. The next knob over is going to be our volume and how to turn on and off the radio. Turning off the radio will be turning it all the way to the left, and turning it all the way to the right will be turning it on and putting your volume at max volume. The next 2 little toggles you see here are the scan and priority. Now remember when we talked about scan lists and making a priority, I'm going to show you how to do that with this radio, and then you're going to need to use these toggles to make sure that they are both on. This button on the side is going to allow you to open up your transmission and talk on the radio. This is where you would hear from the radio. Here is the main screen. And then here are the menu toggles along with the numbers to which we are going to use, and I'll show you later. So let's start with just by turning the radio on. So I am sitting currently on channel 1. I can tell that the scan is on because it is flashing, so let's go ahead and turn that off for now. The name of the zone is going to be listed on the bottom. Right now I'm currently sitting on the East Dixie version 8 zone. Let's talk about building a scan list. If I go into menu, I use these arrows to go up and down to the scan list. Hit enter. Here's our list of channels. So by using your 205 and asking those around you in your division, you'll be able to find what is your best repeated channel. Like we talked about, it's your command channel. So for now, I have NIFC command 8. That is going to be our closest repeater. If I continue down, you'll notice that there are multiple command channels. That's because there are multiple repeaters across the fire. And depending on how close I am to them, I can scan them. But remember, there's only one transmission allowed over command at a time. So even though they're separate repeaters, there's still only one transmission. So if you're listening to one repeater, you're hearing what's going across all of them. If I go further down, we will start getting into what is the tacticals. These ones in here, per this zone, are called VFire 23 and 22. Where I was on this assignment, I needed to listen to both. Let's say that was in Division Alpha. The division was large enough to where we had 2 separate tacticals, so I needed to listen to both. You can add and subtract things from your scan list by pressing this button on the side. You'll know if they are on the scan list because of the plus on the side of the name of the channel. Once you have entered in everything you need to listen to, we're going to hit escape to get back to here. And now we need to turn scan on. You can also test if you're sitting on a scan channel if you switch the channel over with using your toggle up top. As I switch these channels, you'll begin to notice the SCN symbol up at the top of the screen. This is showing what is scanned and what is not. Now, if I turn on scan, you'll notice that it begins to flash. As I switch through these channels, it's going to always continue to flash just because it's showing you that the scan is on. Whatever you have set in your menus, it's currently listening to. Now let's talk about how to make a priority. So, let's make sure scan and priority are off. Okay, let's go into the menu. We're going to select priority channels. Let's go to priority 1. We're going to use per zone. We're not going to make a global priority. Now, using the arrow buttons here to navigate the menu, we can scroll down and select what one channel we want to be the priority for this zone. Remember, a zone being a list of 16 channels, including command and tactical channels. As we discussed earlier, our priority is always going to be on the best command channel. And what I mean by the best command channel is the closest command repeater that's going to give us the clearest message. That way we can hear medical callouts. So let's select enter on NIFC command 8. It's been saved. Escape, escape, escape. You will now notice if I flick over to NIFC Command 8 that it says Priority 1 and that it's been added to my scan list. You've now just made a full scan list and a command priority. So let's make sure that they are both on. All right, our scan is on and our priority is currently on. Now, with that example earlier, let's say we're on a large enough fire to where there's 2 different zones. I'm going to select Zone, and now I can use these arrows here to go between zones. So here was the list of programmed 16 channels that we used out at a bike race. Here is the Dixie West Fire Zone. I could swap between these two, select Enter, and now I am sitting on the list of 16 channels that we used at the bike race, and you can tell because it's the name of the zone down at the bottom. If this is the incorrect zone for your fire, ensure you hit Zone, go to the right one, Enter, and now you can make your scan and priority list. Thank you once again for joining us here at the Mountain Medics YouTube channel. If you have any other questions referring to the equipment we carry, I encourage you to look at the other videos that we have on the channel.